Welcome to qnawire.
All right, first we're going to find part A, f of g of 2. So we start by finding g of 2. So we find where x equals 2, and then we follow that up to where it meets the g graph, and that would be at 5. So g of 2 is 5. We substitute that in, and now we're finding f of 5. So we find x equals 5, and then we go up to where that meets the f graph, and that's at 4. So our answer is 4. Now we do something like that for part B. We start by finding f of 0. So we find x equals 0, and we see where that matches the f graph, and that's at a height of 0. F of 0 is 0. We substitute that in. Now we're finding g of 0, and so we go over to x equals 0 and go up to where that meets the g graph, and that's at a height of 3. Next, let's do part C, f of g of 0, and we can write that this way if we want to, f of g of 0. So the first thing we want to find is g of 0. So we go to where x equals 0, and we find that on the g graph, and that's 3. Substitute that in, and now we have f of 3. So we go over to where x equals 3, and we find that on the f graph, and that's at a height of 0. So the answer is 0. And now for part D, g of f of 6. That can be written as g of f of 6 like this. So the first thing we're finding is f of 6. So we go over to where x equals 6, and we go up on the f graph, and we get 6 for the height. So we substitute that in, and now we're finding g of 6. However, 6 is not in the domain of g. It doesn't go that far. So this one is undefined. All right, here's part E. We can rewrite this as g of negative 2. And so on the inside, we're finding g of negative 2. So we go over to where x equals negative 2 and find that on the g graph, and that's 1. So we substitute that in, and now we're finding g of 1. So we go over to where x equals 1, and we find that on the g graph, and that's right about 4. So the answer is 4. And now for f of 4, which we can rewrite this way, f of 4, we find the inside first, f of 4. So we go over to where x equals 4, and we find that on the f graph, and that is, it's supposed to be 2. Mine's a little low, but if you look at the actual graph, it's 2. So we're going to substitute that in, and now we're looking for f of 2. So we go to where x equals 2, and we find that on the f graph, and that is negative 2. So there's our answer.